Hello, and congratulations to the 2020 graduates of Sitting Bull College. I am truly humbled and honored to celebrate this very special day with you. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Just between us, today, June 5th, is my birthday, and I can't think of a better birthday gift than to be invited to share some thoughts with you. I won't, however, be revealing my age. That will remain a secret. While this graduation ceremony may not be what you had originally dreamed of as you began your college careers, I think the drive-through graduation idea is an exceptional display of creativity and innovation in the face of one of the most unique challenges our nation has faced in decades, COVID-19. I am grateful to the administration of Sitting Bull College, President Laurel Vermillion, the Board of Directors, and the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe for inviting me to share some thoughts with you today. The role of speaking at a commencement ceremony is a great honor, typically reserved for individuals who will inspire you and provide encouragement for what may come next in your lives. But I'm not sure if I will be able to inspire you nearly as much as you all have inspired me just by reaching this huge occasion in your lives. More and more lately, I've been thinking about storytelling and the impact it has on our lives. Stories that tell us where we came from, where we're going, and who we choose to be. I came across the definition of student success that was defined and written by Sitting Bull College students. And it says, to be a successful student at Sitting Bull College, you do not forget who you are and where you came from. The Sitting Bull College Student Code of Conduct includes a description of Lakota Dakota values as a guide for students to follow as they travel along the path of their educational journey. I found these values very inspiring, and they include respect, generosity, compassion, integrity, patience, honesty, humility, wisdom, bravery, and fortitude. When reading the book, The Lakota Way, written by Joseph Marshall III, who is Oglala Lakota, I learned that these values and a couple more, including truth and love, are core qualities that have been passed down through Lakota generations through the storytelling of elders. In his book, Marshall says, the grandmas and grandpas were the living repositories for all those wonderful stories told to them by their elders from generations before. The stories included lessons about these values, like the humility embodied in the legendary Lakota leader, Crazy Horse. I'm reminded of a phrase Crazy Horse used during his time, and it is Sutka Yuha, which means to rise above. Joseph Marshall also says that stories continue to strengthen Lakota society. I can think of no better time in history when these qualities have been more important to humanity. I believe that we could all lead happier and healthier lives if these same core qualities were part of our moral fiber and daily living. The story of the namesake of your college, Chief Sitting Bull, is one of pride, generosity, spirituality, and unshakable bravery to stand up for his beliefs and people. Chief Sitting Bull's impact on history has undoubtedly influenced many. As one of the famous leaders among the Hunkpapa and throughout the world, he was known as a holy man and valiant warrior who stood against the evolving reshaping of native lands. A figurehead in the Battle of Little Bighorn, Sitting Bull's return to Standing Rock in 1883 marked a pivotal point in history where he became a strong voice for all Native American people. Universally renowned for his generosity and his deep concern for people, Chief Sitting Bull was an ardent opponent of poverty and was often seen giving money to the downtrodden of cities he visited. Chief Sitting Bull's legacy of speaking out on behalf of his people and being an advocate in the face of imperialism and broken treaties signifies why he continues to be revered to this day. Today, his story carries on. His spirit lives on and continues to influence people to be courageous for their beliefs and live a life of gratitude and service for others. All of you graduating today carry your own stories and legacy, whether they have been passed down through your family or the new stories you create every day. Your memories as a college student during the COVID-19 pandemic, transitioning to online education, and experiencing graduation through this amazing drive-through event will continue to provide stories for years to come. It is my own story that brings me here today. As First Lady, it is my ultimate goal to end the shame and stigma that surrounds the disease of addiction. I have lived experience with addiction. I have been in recovery from alcohol addiction for over 18 years. In my role representing the state of North Dakota, I have had the opportunity to share my story of struggle in finding recovery. Along the way, I've met so many people, each with their own unique story of how they've been impacted by addiction and recovery. Stories of parents devastated from losing their son to an opioid overdose in his high school parking lot. Stories of lives saved by complete strangers who carried Narcan. And stories of people like Dr. Russ McDonald, president of United Tribes Technical College, who found a renewed life in recovery after going through treatment 16 times. Stories are one of the best tools to end stigma. Stories drive connection to one another, normalize difficult conversations, and can give permission for others to tell their stories and reach out for help. Stigma is commonly defined as a mark of disgrace and is a persistent barrier to confronting addiction and finding recovery. When we stigmatize an issue, we put up walls instead of building bridges. Stigma is socially constructed, based in fear and accompanied by inaccurate information and hollow misconceptions. It is shame and stigma that prevented me from sharing my own story for many years. I spent my first 15 years in recovery in silence, keeping my recovery and my battle with addiction to myself like shameful secrets. On your graduation day, this is a great time to think up your own story up till now and what your story can be in the future. My story of addiction started when I was in high school in Jamestown, North Dakota, when I first started drinking. In high school, I was an all-American teenager, and I had a lot of friends. I was an honor student, involved in student council, tennis, and cheerleading. But there were many days when I couldn't get out of bed, and I didn't understand why. I now know I likely had anxiety and depression. I constantly had these voices in my head telling me I was stupid, I would always make mistakes, and that I needed to be perfect. I didn't have the resources or trustworthy people in school to reach out to for help with my struggles. My Nordic Viking ancestors were explorers and warriors without empathy. So growing up in my house, we didn't sit around the dinner table and talk about feelings or struggles or ask for help. Although my parents did the best they could with what they knew at the time and with how they were raised, unfortunately, my upbringing included a lot of fear based on inadequacies I felt in school and at home, and the fear of not fitting in or being worthy. When I started drinking in high school, I thought I had found nirvana. It seemed to be the answer to all my problems. As an introvert, it helped me to live the life of an extrovert. It was basically like saying, there's a magic cure that will make me comfortable in front of other people. And I wanted to sign up for that. Unfortunately, the deep insecurities followed me after high school, which led to 20 plus years of drinking with uncontrollable urges and devastating consequences. And even though I knew I had a problem with drinking, I didn't reach out for help for over 20 years. Current statistics show that only 1 in 10 people who need treatment for the disease of addiction will actually seek and receive treatment. I fell into the category of the 90% of the people that don't seek treatment. I didn't seek help because of the shame and stigma of addiction. But my story reached a turning point when I decided to share my truth with someone. I really liked my team leader at work, and even though I was afraid to talk about my struggles, I made the decision to share my story with her. I requested a lunch meeting, and I'm pretty sure I thought about canceling the meeting about 100 times. At lunch, I started to share my story, and I remember just looking down and crying, feeling so small as I talked through how addiction was devastating my life. When I finally took a breath and had the courage to look up in her eyes, there were tears in her eyes. I fully expected to be judged and shamed because that was my deeply held fear. But instead, she looked at me and said, "Okay, let's do this." She didn't look at me as less than or make me feel ashamed. She simply listened, showed me compassion, and supported me to go to treatment. That moment of vulnerability to share my story with someone else played a profound role in helping me find recovery. Being brave enough and vulnerable enough to share our personal stories of struggle that we think define us as defective can be life-changing. I decided to share my story of addiction and recovery publicly during my first newspaper interview as First Lady. Up to that time, I had not publicly shared that I was a person in long-term recovery. I'll never forget that day. The interview was on a cold and sunny February day at the governor's residence. I was preparing for the interview, thinking about what I would say, like how I never dreamed I would ever be First Lady and how much my life had changed in just 2 months. All of a sudden, I had a vivid moment of clarity, and I thought, I need to talk publicly about my addiction and recovery. This moment of clarity happened about 5 minutes before the interview. I went to my husband and I told him, I'm going to talk about recovery in the interview, and I'm going to tell my story. His eyes lit up with surprise and excitement, the way it would for anyone who has become your #1 champion in your life. I positioned myself on the couch in the living room of the governor's residence, and the interview started. After a few questions, the interviewer said this: "You shared that you are going to be working on eliminating the stigma surrounding addiction as your platform. That's an interesting initiative for a First Lady to take on. Why are you so passionate about this?" I took a deep breath, and with no doubt that I was doing this for all the right reasons, to elevate the conversations around this disease, to show everyone that people who struggle with addiction can look like you and me, and to maybe help just one person that might be moved by my story. I said, I'm very passionate about addiction because it affects me personally. I've actually been in recovery from addiction to alcohol for 15 years. I felt like a 100-pound weight had been lifted off my shoulders at that moment. All of the years of silence, of shame, of wondering if I could ever talk about the significant part of my life disappeared into thin air. The words and stories began to flow easily. I described that I had sought treatment at one point and then relapsed for 8 years. I spoke of the hardship I faced when dealing with my jobs, my friends, my family, and of the hope and promise that I found in my recovery. Vulnerability is key to being able to share your stories. It is key to receiving support, and for transforming the lives around you through your stories. Whether your story is about personal struggle, how you were resilient in overcoming a challenge or barrier, or how you supported a friend or family member through a difficult time. These stories liberate us from the belief that our struggles are unique and that we are alone in our struggles. Sharing stories has the opportunity to remove the idea that we are alone and can show us that there is a community of support. My story of addiction and recovery, your story may be something different. My challenge for all of you is to think about the major stories of your life and how they are forming your future. And take courage in sharing these stories with the people in your life, friends, family, co-workers, random strangers, because you have no idea how your story may transform someone else's life. I have looked back on my life and wondered what my potential might have been if not interrupted by my addiction at such a young age. But where I am today is exactly where I should be. And the path that led me here today is part of my story. My story is made up of countless little stories and lessons. So in the spirit of Sitting Bull, I encourage you to carry his strength, his knowledge, his values, and grow them into your own spirit. By doing so, you continue to make your proud nation strong and prosperous for the next 7 generations. Wopila! Thank you.